Okay, great. Well, thank you for those of you guys who are watching us live, or I know this content is also being recorded for the Sphere Film Festival 2021. My name is Amish Dave. I'm a community member in Seattle, Washington, and a board member of Indian American Community Services. And joining me today, we're so fortunate to have the director of Ye Freedom Life, Ms. Priya Sen, joining us from Delhi. Priya, it's so nice to, thank you so much for joining us this early in the morning in Delhi.
Thank you, Amish. It's very nice to actually be here.
I have to say how much I love your film, and every time I watch this film, I feel like I'm seeing new things. And I just kind of wanted to, ask you first about, the health fair at the very beginning of the film. It's showing, it seems like this very paternalistic series of like information geared towards these women who are getting these bags filled with mehndi and sari and coconuts and protein milk, and the women are being told about how they can essentially, they have to pleasure their men in order to keep them satisfied and stay. And I'm just kind of curious about, why start with this health fair first, and is this very much how you see culture and how it's directed at women in India?
Thank you. Well, actually, for me, the main reason for starting with the health fair was that I needed to somehow establish this place where I filmed, Dakshin Puri, where Praveen and Sachi live, Ambedkar Nagar, Dr. Ambedkar Nagar, in the imagination of Delhi. So instead of actually just sort of showing it as, with aerial shots and sort of in those ways, I needed to actually frame it ethically and in how a place like that actually exists for Delhi, in Delhi's, in the imagination of power in Delhi. So therefore, the women who I actually brought to this fair, they were all from that neighborhood. So it's like sort of these state agendas that are then fulfilled by people in certain parts of the city, right? It's been done through like that's just how it is. People are brought to election rally. In many situations, they're brought to just to fill them, to do the numbers. So in this case, it was really interesting to me because the people who were there, the women who were being, who were actually having to participate in this were from Dakshin Puri, which is where the other people are from. And I actually never show the health fair or have anything to do with the health fair after the first part, and I hope everyone forgets about it. But the reason I do it is because yes, it's a certain sort of like biopolitics, right, at work. And it's a particular state that is in our bodies at this point. And it is the narrative of that state, right? So like the Mahabharata, all of mythology that's brought up, this sort of like crazy ideas of like, like you said, pleasuring the man, otherwise you leave, otherwise, you lose him, da da da. And then of course, all the things that they get. It's very focused towards a particular narrative, right? I mean, it's a very Hindu traditional idea of what it means to give birth, and literally the people who the film is about are on somewhere the opposite end of this spectrum, and them and many other people. So that was my main that was the idea. I mean, it is a frame, it is not the frame, right? So this is not necessarily how I see Indian culture. I don't. But it is definitely one of those, it's a massive agenda, right? So yeah.
So then, and very thankfully, the film kind of switches from that health fair to focus on the lives of these incredibly charismatic characters on Praveen and Sachi. And I think the first thing that immediately comes to my mind is, how did you find two such charismatic individuals? And Um, I think one of the challenges I imagine is asking individuals who might not always live in the forefront of society to share so much of their personal lives on camera. And I don't know if you feel comfortable telling us a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, it was definitely it was very serendipitous, I have to say. I mean, I met Sachi first because we were looking for young people. This was a very straight up question that I asked before the film, you know, when we were trying to find people to participate, because I didn't know this was going to be the film, right? So just we were trying to talk to young women who were at a particular point in their lives where they had to choose to get, but they not had to choose. They were expected to get married. So it's a very, you know, it's a very particular time in young people's lives, especially here, where, and this is across class, where you're supposed to make that decision about, you know, getting married. So I was interested in that question, and we went to various places, and I have a long relationship with Dakshinpuri, which is the place where the beauty parlor is and where Praveen's shop is. So I've worked there in a different way with, you know, young people through these experimental media labs that we had since 2005. So, which is the reason I went back there. I can't just go in anywhere, you know what I'm saying? And the parlor was one of those places that was very open to us being there. And the first person I met there was Sachi. And I was just like, oh, okay. And she was just like, and I said, so the question was very simple. I said, you know, are you interested in getting married? And, you know, do you want to talk about that? And she said, no, I'm not interested in getting married, but I do want to have a life with my friend. And it took me a day to ask her. She was like, you know, I mean, it was like, oh, is this friend like a man or woman? And, you know, and she's like, yeah, no, she's a girl. She lives like a boy. And that's literally where, you know, when we started filming. And we also met Praveen extremely serendipitously as well. I mean, there was this whole demonetization that had happened, right? In India, where the suddenly certain denominations of like currency were like pulled out. So people were literally left without any money. And Praveen was hustling at, you know, near the bank, near his shop, and he was giving out tokens. And a friend of mine was there trying to whatever be at that bank. So somehow they met, and then I was introduced. So, and then it just literally took off from there, because I mean the connection, the sort of relationship with them just happened extremely organically. And you know, at the very start, I was just like, okay, listen, this is a film that, you know, I'm trying to make, and I'm interested in what, you know, you would think. And so, and I think being very upfront really was the only way to do it, and be like, okay. And then of course I had no idea what, you know, what would emerge. So yeah, is that the question? Did you ask me any other part of the question, or?
No, that was kind of like what I was going for. Like
And
I was
how did
trying to
they
understand, yeah, and you know,
about the
how did you
personal
get to
part?
meet them, and how did they feel comfortable sharing so much about their lives, you know?
Yeah, it's a question I'm asked every single time. Praveen had he was amazing one day when this was very much into what we'd been filming for a while. And there was this time where you know, him and I were alone. It's all the ones where I'm in his house mainly. So Ankur, my very, very close friend and cinematographer, was there for a lot of, you know, she shot all the beauty parlor, a lot of the street, but certain things I shot. And so when Praveen and I were talking, and I was just like, Praveen, like, what you know, you have this camera in front of your face, and you're saying all this stuff, you know, like, you said a lot of things to me. Do you think it's kind of getting a bit personal? And he was just like, you know what? The thing is that personal, this word that you keep using, it's your word. It's not my word. So that was very, very interesting to me, because I was just like, okay, so, you know, one is coming with a whole host of assumptions into a space in which things actually work quite differently, or, you know, there's a different understanding of closeness and intimacy and porousness. The beauty parlor had that, the street has that. And sort of somehow the way Praveen lives his life, where people are in and out of his space constantly, it's there. So, it was a structure that I was entering into. It was not something that I was doing necessarily. I mean, we had a great vibe, all of us, and that shows, I think. But it was also the spaces, the sort of the nature of the beauty parlor, the nature of the street. It is
Yeah,
that, you know?
absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, Sachi's character, it's just, it's hard not to love her. She's so idealistic and positive. And, I think about the beauty parlor. There were so many scenes in the beauty parlor that just that tugged at my heart, where, for example, the auntie comes in and she's just like, well, for some people, it's okay if they do things, but really, I believe that God made it so that only men and women can be together. And regardless of her, whatever she says, Sachi's still taking care of her, her beauty parlor needs. And then the security guard comes in and is really talking about, trials and tribulations, about her not being married. And so her younger brother and younger sister can't get married. And Sachi has to listen to all of this. She has to listen to everybody else's, personal opinion. And I think
Uh-huh.
of the beauty parlor is one of those places where you can't help but listen to gossip and other people's opinions because there's so much time to do it. How does Sachi stay so positive in the face of this? Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, no, Sachi's amazing. She's amazing. She really is. She believes in this relationship. You know, uh, she just will not. I mean, she's stressed about it constantly, but they're still together. Um, but Sachi is also a deeply religious person. I think there is something of that is extremely for her that is grounded in her faith. So and she believes, and this is the thing. I mean, like, you can be deeply religious and you can love a woman, and it doesn't need to like be this sort of moralistic sort of. And then she says, she's like, you don't listen beyond a point. Society is like this thing that doesn't have your interests at heart, and your people. And she has a very sort of boundaried relationship with her parents, and she says she doesn't really have. She's a loner. She's a loner at the end of the day. She has Sai, and she has her job. She no longer has the job. I mean, after this, I mean, the pandemic has changed many things for these women. But at the time, she was very clear. She was very clear about the things that she needed to do, and she would just do them. I mean, yeah, and this thing with Sai, she was constantly anxious. I mean, that's the thing, like this love. As much as it motivates you, it also leaves you. I mean, it's so precarious. I mean, she has no idea what Sai is going to do next, because Sai is a player, and she knows that. But yeah, I mean, we were there, we were together, we filmed for a period of 15 months. So I knew them and I've known them since. Um, and for 15 months is a long time to actually get to know people. So there were moments, she definitely had moments where she was quite, in despair, and, she was angry and hurt and all of that. And I think it comes through also. I mean, she's just like, but there's a way in which, but you just continue, right? I mean, this is both Praveen, Sachi, everybody. I mean, it was us also. We were always having this conversation about things happen, you continue, you just like find a way to like get on with it.
In so much of the film, there's this concept, it seems like, of waiting, in a sense, like people are waiting for someone to make a decision about, I feel like for Sachi, about her lover taking the time to get to marry her or move in with her. Did you get a sense of, you know what ultimately, I guess this kind of goes into, you had brought up that things have changed during the pandemic, and I think it kind of brings up the question of like what's happened since then. Have the relationships changed? are people happier now, or what's been happening to the characters, I guess?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, everything's changed and no one's happy. No one's happy. They've all lost their work, which is like, not all, at least the parlor's shut down. The parlor no longer exists. So these independent working people are suddenly out of jobs and are having to then have much less negotiating, capacities with their families. So, that's a big one. I know that Sachi is trying to get back into some other kind of work situation, and I know that she's having a hard time with her parents because her parents are like on her case now to get, of course, this whole marriage question, not even the marriage question, or just like, it's just everything, right? So it's just everything. So anyway, but then since the film, I mean, Section 377 was repealed. So like, it's no longer a criminal offense, to be gay, which is a huge thing, which actually didn't have any role to play when we were filming. In many ways, like the law is, there's so many, like the whole film is situated within multiple legalities, the legality of space, place, those are, it's just like, not just about being gay or not being gay or any of that, so like, but then suddenly, a lot has happened in Praveen's life, and we've had to intervene. The court has had to intervene, and because the court has had, because 377 is no longer there, we could do that. And somehow the law has played this crazy role in making life better somehow in a way that their social worlds haven't necessarily done. Like, so for example, Praveen's new girlfriend was somebody who had a family, who left her family, and you can't just leave a family and walk out. I mean, you can't. You have FIRs, police cases, kidnapping charges that are put against you. So we had to literally deal with the police, we had to deal with the cop, we had to deal with the courts. We finally had an order that Praveen's girlfriend could live with whoever she wanted to, because she's an adult. So which is great. Could have gone either way. So, but that also because, and then also because of 377 not being there, people can't just call the cops on them. So it's huge. So yes, in that way, definitely, there has been this massive shift, but in that way, but very little else has changed. They keep fighting the family. Family is very oppressive. I cannot say it enough. In the lives of so many young people in general, it's just like the conflict with the family is like the main conflict, the main reason for you to not move ahead. And, so it's been, I know that it plays out in a certain way in Praveen's life, and it plays out, in a less sort of implicating way in Sachi's life. But yeah, it's just not easy with your family,
So can I ask, like, Priya, like, have Praveen's Sachi watched the film themselves, and have their families seen the film? What was their reaction?
No, they didn't want that. I mean, the thing is, like, Praveen's family doesn't live with him. Like, Praveen's friends, are in and out. So now these people all don't know each other, right? I mean, Praveen doesn't necessarily know Sachi, but it's a scene, so they kind of know of each other, So I showed the film to Sachi. First up, she watched it at home. I needed to show it to her first, and to Praveen. Showing it to the family is not even a question that comes up. Like, it's not even a thing. You can't do that. I mean, you cannot do that. You cannot even, and that's part of the reason why the film is not open access, because they don't want it necessarily to circulate in Dakshin Puri or whatever, because I mean, it's not easy. There's so many layers to this. I mean, especially now when things are so crazy, like, you don't want anything to kind of like disrupt. So Praveen and Sachi was just like, oh yeah, whatever, this is interesting. She said the word. She said it's interesting. Praveen was unmoved by the film. Shalu, his friend, was like, oh, please don't make a film like this again. Because then I realized that it's too real. you know, and it was very interesting to see how, the people in the film saw the film in a completely different way. They were just like, yeah, okay. And I also didn't show, Praveen's new girlfriend. She was also in the film, but since she was the most precarious, I kind of like didn't show, I showed her face in parts, and and she was just like, why did you do that? It's just like, I said, because you're the one who was leaving your husband or your husband, like you can't have them come, and she was just like, she said, oh, whatever. She said, okay, next time, we can do it. So in that sense, it's kind of like a thing. It's so contradictory. It's so interestingly so many things. Yeah, there's no question of actually having a screening in Dakshin Puri, but the film is shown in so many spaces, and spaces like Dakshin Puri, to young people, young women coming from some of these kind of areas, a lot of these areas, young sex workers. I mean, it's just like, and it interestingly does different things in different audiences. So that's been so great for me to actually, and before the pandemic, one could even be there, you were there to see what the
what are you
response was. Mhm.
when when you made this film to maybe now, like what when you because you mentioned that the film is going to be shown more in closed screenings, it's not going to be shown so it's more like for the international circuit, more for
Oh, no,
art
no, no, no,
houses and
no,
festivals, or tell
no,
me
no,
a
no,
bit
no, no.
more. Yeah.
Not like that. Not like that. No, no. No, it's not for that at all. I mean, it's just not. It's just it's not. It's not. It doesn't cut mainstream here, so
Mhm.
it would never be a mainstream film here, right? Which is fine. And what I do is what I say, like, I wouldn't necessarily put this on YouTube. Um,
Okay.
because that is what I mean. Like, it's not. It is online, but it's passworded. So it's not shareable in that sense. As far as I can control it. I mean, you can't control this stuff beyond the point. Um, and that's what I mean. No, it's not for, it is equally for international, whatever, as it is for here. It's played in several, many, many places here.
What are
Um,
that kind of brings me back to my question, but what are you hoping people take from this film? Because I see the film and it makes me feel like I need to be more of an activist, pushing more for other people's rights and their opportunities. But it sounds like the characters themselves don't necessarily want that level of involvement per se. I'm curious about what are you hoping the audience takes from the film?
um, yeah, so I mean, this whole thing about, what is a gay movie, or like, is this a queer film? Of course, it's a queer film on the one hand, but I don't necessarily, it's not just a queer film, like in the sense, like, it loses some of its power because, I mean, firstly, none of these people are calling themselves queer, right? I mean, they're framing their identities in a very different way. And so, so I've been asked many times, like, you know, did you have the trans conversation? And I was just like, no, I didn't need to. Um, so there's a certain language of uh, queer rights, queer activism that does not necessarily circulate in this scenario at all. But there's another language entirely. Like, you can see that there's a scene. It just plays out, and it's an extremely normative fantasy that everyone's having, right? It's extremely normative in many ways, but then it also comes up against its own limitations, so like you can't go beyond it beyond. But I mean, my expectation, I don't necessarily know whether I expected people to have a certain or to have a takeaway or anything like that. I just wanted to open things up. I had other questions about films, making films about nonfiction form that I wanted to actually um, play with, and to sort of look at the idea of representation, for example, in a more open and fluid way than to always be so implicated by, oh, look at this filmmaker with the camera. And there's so much power. There's so much like an imbalance. So then, I was just asking different questions of the process rather than of the people. So I think that was something that was very interesting to me while making the film. And I was just like, okay, there can be like many, many solidarities that come in, many ways in which we have things in common rather than not. And of course, because of the whole queerness thing, that eased things up. At least that was a vibe, and it was like, it was great. And there was a lot of energy. We were all, there was a lot of performing. We were equally performative. Everyone, performing meaning like the awareness of the camera and what it's doing, right? So those are kind of questions I asked. And I actually have much more expectations of like the form being something else rather than thinking that, oh, you need to be sort of like somehow involved in making these people's lives better.
So we have a question, Priya, from the audience. Several of your characters are apparently quite religious. As I understand it, however, their sexual identities are not really accepted or even represented in Indian society currently. Could you comment on your character's understanding of or relationship between their religious identity and their sexual identity?
Well, in fact, yeah, I mean, I think the two coexist as far as I can see, and the two coexist extremely easily and well. It's not that there is no representation of that in India. Of course there is, and like, you know, there was an entire gay movement, and it was a very long and arduous movement. And there are many constituencies of queer, and some are more representative, some are not. Like, so the fact that, like I said, Sachi and Praveen and, you know, their lot are not necessarily talking about themselves as gay, as queer people. They are extremely comfortable with what that does, or how they are with that. So I think, yeah, so the religious and the sexual identity don't necessarily like are not at odds with each other at all, until that's thrust upon us in some way. Everything is thrust upon us somehow politically, some agenda. But thankfully, somehow, queerness is not interesting enough to to this Hindutva thing as much. I mean, it's just one of those things that is kind of, it's interesting. I wonder at it, but it's not. But somehow, being gay and being non-religious, sort of being gay has nothing to do with being Hindu. You know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. And we have kind of a kind of another question by another audience member. You as the filmmaker apparently managed to be totally accepted within the circle of your totally adorable cast. Could you please talk about the process of getting to that point? And I know that you talked a little bit about this, but I'm also going to take my prerogative as the moderator, ask the question of, were there times where you felt like you were in conflict with your cast members too?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there were so many times when, you know, everyone was being like, also because of the whole very normative fantasy that everyone was in, there was a time when I was just like, are you serious? I mean, like, why would you want to play this role? You know, like in exactly the same way. So actually, just, you know, because the sort of those roles are intact, you know, the very patriarchal ideas of upholding certain values seem to be sort of also there. I mean, completely, right? The whole idea of marriage. And I was like, marriage? I mean, like, everyone's getting married. No one's getting married. Everyone's getting, I mean, it was really interesting, really fun. But of course, I was just like, why would you do that? Why would you put yourselves in this, you know, like, why would you further box yourselves in, you know, like, why would you do that? You have this opportunity to not do that. But that was just like, because what else, what other imagination is there for like the culmination of love? There isn't, not here at least. You can't live your life. The problem is when you decide to live your life with another person like this, you know, the problem is not that you're having sex. You know, there is sex out of like heterosexual marriage, like all the time, right? MSM, whole category, the whole HIV discourse is on that, you know, over here. So it's not, sex is not the problem. Problem is when you decide to live your life with somebody else. So yeah, there were times when I was just like, oh my God, why? And then Praveen is constantly fighting with everybody. So, but the thing is to like, you're there and you're just like, we were, you know, it didn't take long for us to all be, we were all doing what we do. You know, that was a more interesting, that was also a very interesting thing that we were all doing. So, like, you know, so that was a great dynamic. I don't know how it necessarily, I wouldn't be able to answer like how, but friendship and presence and attention and mindfulness. I mean, I suppose it all comes in, like it's also deeply, deeply sort of involved, intimate space that we had with each other.
Well, we're very grateful that we got to look into this incredibly intimate and wonderful space into these characters. Priya, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I know it's super early in Delhi, and we really appreciate your film, and we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Amish, and thank you for some very lovely questions. It's always nice to go back and like talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And
Okay.
let's see. And thank you, and have and be safe. And we look forward to seeing more of your work over time.
Thanks. Thank you.